Welcome to today. And how are you today? How are you faring in your life? How is it by you? So I was talking with my father yesterday, and he was telling me about the experience where he lives of being in the heart of Pennsylvania Dutch country in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and being there on Ascension Day. Now, Ascension Day was Wednesday, I think, but in the Presbyterian tradition, in our way of practicing our faith, the things that we threw out, many of the holidays and the feasts of the Roman Catholic Church, the Presbyterian Church did away with. There was this massive simplification. The idea was that the faith had become so complicated and complex with feasts and festivals and rituals and all those kinds of things, of course, trying to bolster our understanding and our response to the resurrection. I mean, that's it. That's the bud that gave the flower of the church. But the reformers felt that all of these things had become ways of abusing the people's willingness to do whatever they were told because the ordinances were coming from God, that they were somehow structured, ultimately structured by Jesus himself, none of which was the case. Jesus was Jewish, and as far as we can tell, he kept the Jewish feasts. But this celebration of the Ascension is something that happens in this week, which is of those 50 days that Jesus walked and appeared. He was known to and seen by his followers and by strangers after they had seen him and witnessed that he had been murdered, executed on the cross. He was alive again until the day that he was out on the mountain. And it seemed like something that he knew was going to happen, that his time had come on earth completely, and that he was going to be lifted up. He was lifted up. So in the end, Jesus, who was dead and buried, he was in the tomb and then raised again, didn't die again. He did not die again. He was lifted off of the earth. That is how it was given to us. He ascended. He just went up. I guess because we still hold to the sort of three-story universe, heaven is up, earth is here, and hell is down there, that, he was lifted up off the earth and went up to heaven, wherever that is. We know that up doesn't really tell you much. Up, not much up there, up. I mean, there's a world of universes up there, but what does that mean? So he was lifted up. He was taken up off the earth. In the Bible, there were a couple of other people that were who were lifted up. Elijah, I think, probably one of the most famous, and that is a great prophet, troublemaker, to be truthful, in the history of Israel, a prophet who stirred the waters, and he really did not like it when he felt that the pure faith of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, that their pure faith and the practice of their faith was getting watered down, not just diluted, but washed away by the presence of the Hebrew faith amid other faiths. And he was a purist. He really believed in ritual purity. He believed in practice purity, that you had to do the things that you were told to do and to leave off all the practices of other religions. But Elijah, at the end of his time of challenging all the competing ideologies and theologies of his time, was lifted up off the earth. A chariot came down and picked him up. Chariot from heaven. He climbed into the chariot and was taken off. His robe descended to the earth and was picked up by Elisha, his successor, as a sign that the authority that Elijah had, and he appeared to be a very powerful man, that his authority was now going to be passed on to Elisha. I think there's a vague reference even older in the scriptures to Methuselah, who lived to be 900 years and then was not. That's a strange kind of a thing. It doesn't say then he died. It's just he walked on the earth and then he didn't. He just wasn't here anymore. The ascension of Jesus, not in the practice of the rituals of the Reformed Church. It isn't that the church didn't believe or didn't know the story of Jesus' ascension. It had been exploited in the minds of the reformers, the simplifiers. They came in like with a hatchet and they lopped off all the saints. They took all the practice of praying to saints and all of the contributions for saints and all the rest of that. They just got rid of all of that because they saw that the structure of the priests were abusing these feasts as ways of getting money from people. They were teaching doctrines that began to be strange about, you pray to a certain saint, and that saint could then help you in your life. And then, to them, to the reformers, it had all grown like a plant that it was root bound. It had grown beyond anything they could find as authentic in terms of their search for the pure faith, the practice of pure religion, of pure Christianity. And their belief was that it was 1,500 years, and in that 1,500 years' time, more and more and more things had been added, many of which they felt were abusive. Now, prior to the Reformers movement, there was Elijah Muhammad, the founder of the Muslim faith. And if you can look past all the rhetoric of today and listen, I'm not endorsing what many of the extremists for the Muslim faith hold, but I don't endorse what many of the extremists for the Christian faith hold. I don't. But if you listen to what, when, and where, and how Elijah Muhammad began his movement in the 700s, the 800s, his movement was similar. He looked at the practice of Christianity. He was very familiar with it. He'd grown up in the environment of it, and he said, most of this is just ridiculous. This is ridiculous. You can't pin all of this to a faithful life. You can't. These things that have grown up as, traditions and sacred days and all the rest of those things, they need to be removed. So Elijah Muhammad said, basically, you just give me a prayer mat large enough for my knees to be on and show me the direction to east, and I will be on that prayer mat 5 times a day, and I will pray my prayers, and that will be the practice of my faith. That's the origins of the Muslim faith. Now, again, you can see it take place all the time. The founders of a movement give it impetus in one big direction, and then the followers come along, and like barnacles on the bottom of a ship, they begin to add and add and add until the ship can no longer sail. The reformers in the 14th and 15th century, it took out a scraping knife and scraped off what they thought were the barnacles. Now, my own belief is they went crazy. They got rid of all the teachings about Mary. It began to be, in the Reformed Church, it began to be a sign that you were like not Christian because you were still somehow revering Mary, because Mary had grown in the church to be almost higher than Jesus. The icons and the pictures of Jesus and Mary and they call the Holy Family, you see Mary playing a central role, and Jesus is just an infant on her lap. Well, in the Reformers' mind, things had gotten really out of control. They systematically did not like the important role of a woman in the practice of the faith. No, Mary became like that was the baby with the bathwater. They just said, no, nothing of the saints, no prayers to Mary. You don't pray to Mary. She isn't our Savior. She's relegated to the role of she was just the mother of Jesus. And so now we arrive here at this Feast of the Ascension, which my dad was telling me that the Amish celebrate in great style. The school's closed for the Amish children. There's no work on the Ascension Day feast. And what he said to me was that he wished I would have been out there to see it. Out into the streets and the highways, all the Amish families off the farms, instead on the streets, moving around. There's a Strasburg Railroad is there, and all the Amish were on the railroad having a day off, having a great celebration on the news on the day of remembering the day that Jesus was lifted up off of the earth. In the scriptures, there's a little dialogue recorded about what happened as the disciples were there, and they thought that maybe now, maybe after these 50 days, maybe now Jesus was going to speak toward the heavens, and angels of mercy and justice were going to come, and now the war, the conflict, if you will, of good and evil was going to take place, and Jesus was going to take his place on a physical throne and rule the world. So they're asking, look, you're here, you were raised from the dead, we get it, we see the power that you have. When will the reign of God really begin? And Jesus' response is, why are you standing here looking up into heaven? The reign of God has begun. It's begun in your hearts. What the phrase he actually says is, it's none of your business. Now get to work. And the work, of course, is the work that Jesus called us to in the work of love, in the work of humility, and the work of caring for one another. Sisters and brothers in our own family and sisters and brothers in other families. To be a community of people that is ruled by love, that the commandment of God is not some perfunctory, you must do this and then I'm going to do this for you. No, the commandment of God is the commandment of love. It's the core of human life. And Jesus says to those descendants, those followers there, I'm leaving now, but I'm leaving you with the mandate. I'm leaving you with the requirement. Remember Maundy Thursday? I said it was Mandate Thursday. Jesus washed their feet and said, do you know what I've done for you? And this is the commandment I give to you, that you love one another. So in the end, all of the hope of some other worldly alternative and solution to the problems that human beings face, Jesus again, they went up, not so much in smoke, but in the mist. Jesus says, now, go and do. Go, I send you. Go, preach the gospel. And baptize people. Let them know of God's love for them. Let them know of their acceptance before God across the board. Go to all the world and preach the gospel of God's love. Now, goodbye. Ascension Day is the day where, we are to have received the final message from Jesus. Now, what follows Ascension Day is Pentecost, because he sent them to Jerusalem. And he said, I want you to go from here to Jerusalem, and I want you to wait there for what's going to happen next. And then, of course, we know the Sunday after this coming Sunday is the Sunday of Pentecost. It was a Jewish feast celebrating 50 days And, and it was a time of, I think it was a celebration of harvest, although it's at the wrong time of year. But it was a Jewish feast. It was a big feast after Passover, 50 days after Passover. And so there was a great festival feast on that day. They were to go and be there on the Pentecost feast day in Jerusalem, where the crowds would be gathered again, and then you will receive further instructions. That's what Jesus said. And they went, and we'll go through it this coming week in ways that are hard to describe. The power of God to fulfill the great commandment of love descended into their lives, and they were filled with this incredible ability to speak across national boundaries, across language boundaries, across economic dividers and gender dividers, and an emergence of, yes, the God of the world, of all the world, had come to fill these followers with the power of love and move them out to be loving the world, move them out to be caring in the world, to be baptizing in the world, to be preaching with their words and with their lives that God welcomes all, God loves all. So, it's the Feast of Ascension, right? You knew that already. You knew what that was all about, didn't you? Well, if you did, you knew more than I did, because, again, I grew up it's not kind, but most of the history of what I was told about what it means for me to be a Christian was that you know you're a Christian as long as you're not Catholic, and I mean it that way. Whatever Catholics did, that's what you don't do. We didn't light candles. We didn't pray to saints. We didn't have Mary in our yard in a statue. We didn't have the beads, the prayer beads that were around our neck. We didn't have communion. We didn't have the sacrament every Sunday like a magical thing. Everything that was Catholic, we put aside, and that helped to define us as Christians. That's what, in my new members class for Presbyterians, I stay with, a little bit of my tongue in my cheek, but pressed down with some bitterness, that Presbyterians are just not Catholics, and that's the end of it. Now, the times we live in today, that's no longer true. Presbyterian Christians and Catholic Christians and Methodist Christians are beginning to understand what a mistake it was to create all those divides. Yes, we need not to have unnecessary, encumbering practices, but we still need the disciplines of our regular way of saying, I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian. And I serve a Lord who is not present on this planet in body, but who was here and who is raised now. And because he is ascended to heaven, the power and his vision and his understanding of life encompasses all of life, including my own. So that's my hopes for you today, my friends, that some of that power of God's reign and love will be breaking into your lives as the consequence of this season of Easter. Even as we get new and lighter restrictions and we experience more freedom in terms of how to go about our lives without the fear of a deadly pestilence, that in that same way, maybe as a good metaphor of that, we can live into exercising the strength of our faith and loving one another and getting to work, as Jesus said. Or perhaps we want to wait. We want to wait for that next infilling that came in the Pentecost season, for the infilling of the church. And that will be our Sunday here. That will be our day of gathering. It looks like we'll be gathering here without half of the requirements that we anticipated, but that we'll be able to have a chance to gather here and celebrate the power of God's love and God's commandment to love and the call to love and service as people join together. That's my hopes for us today, my friends. It's my hope for you on this beautiful day. I pray that your life is moving in a way that reflects the beauty and the wonder of God's love. And if not, I pray for healing for you, for what's broken and for what's not okay. I'll see you here on Monday, my friends, in the continuation of the pastor's chat at 2 o'clock. And I wish for you a great weekend. We'll be here on this channel for the Gathering of Faith gathering for this coming Sunday. And I look forward to meeting you here, even if virtually. God bless you, my friends. I'll talk to you soon.